This week, change of territory, change of plans, and change of leaders. On the 10th, Major General George B. McClellan is feeling a little under the weather. President Lincoln takes advantage of the General-in-Chief being out of action and calls a meeting with the leaders of the Eastern Front of the war, Brigadier General Irvin McDowell and Brigadier General William Franklin, both division commanders in the Army of the Potomac. Also political leaders, Thomas Scott, the Assistant Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, Senior Advisor to the Secretary of War, and Salmon P. Chase, the Secretary of the Treasury. Notably, Simon Cameron, the actual Secretary of War, is not invited. During the meeting, Lincoln displays his displeasure at McClellan's unwillingness to go on the offensive and says to all those assembled, "If McClellan is not going to use the army anytime soon, I would like to borrow it." The Commander-in-Chief asks for anything, an attack, an offensive, just good posturing, proof that the Army of the Potomac can still fight. The same day in Kentucky, Union Brigadier General Don Carlos Buell is consolidating the U.S.'s control over eastern Kentucky, while General Albert Sidney Johnston of the Confederacy has to deal with a wide range of territory from the Mississippi River to the Cumberland Gap. Buell wants to use strategic precision strikes amongst this defensive line and force Johnston to reform his army further south. Part of this assault will have Colonel James A. Garfield and his 18th Brigade to attack Brigadier General Humphrey Marshall and force him into Virginia proper. On the 9th, Garfield pushes Marshall out of Floyd County, Paintsville, and forces him to a nearby creek. He can see Marshall's camp, and early on the morning of the 10th, Garfield heads out and disperses Confederate cavalry threatening his flank, allowing him to now strike directly at Marshall. As I said earlier, Garfield has the 18th Brigade, made up of the 14th and 22nd Kentucky Infantry, 1st Kentucky Cavalry, and the 40th and 42nd Ohio. In total, this equals around 2,100 men. Brigadier General Marshall actually outnumbers him with 2,500 men from the 5th and 54th Virginia Infantry, a bunch of unorganized cavalry companies, and an artillery battalion. Marshall is actually in Paintsville to recruit and train his men, so while Marshall does have the numbers on his side, he doesn't have a lot of experience among the fighting men, and a lot of discipline. Marshall forms a battle line, with the forks from Middle Creek protecting his flanks, and a little after noon, Colonel Garfield engages with battle. For hours the fight is fierce. The Union is holding steady in the center and right, but their left is looking pretty shaky. Then, Union reinforcements arrive, and reinforce the left. Marshall now risks his complete line breaking with his men's morale low, so he withdraws. The Union suffered 27 casualties, but inflicted 65. It's just part of a greater Union advance, but General Johnston has reason to be worried just by this battle alone. The very next day, a further development in Kentucky. After hearing of the Union victory at Middle Creek, Admiral Andrew Foote tells Commodore William Porter to attack Confederate vessels with 2 gunboats. Both are ironclads, the USS Essex and USS St. Louis, move to attack 3 cotton-clad gunships. The CSS Jackson, CSS Ivy, and CSS General Polk, cotton-clad gunships are exactly what you think, wooden gunships with cotton bales on their side. The Confederates also have a floating battery, the CSS New Orleans, and an onshore battery for this battle. At 11 a.m., a running battle commences, and it's over very quickly. As the Union gunboats reach Columbus, that onshore battery I mentioned earlier opens fire. They miss, but the Union decides not to risk it and withdraws. This battle was inconclusive and had 0 casualties. But the Union has once again proven that they are the dominant naval power among all rivers. And the same day as that, a long overdue resignation. Secretary of War Simon Cameron resigns. Cameron was a political appointee. He's from the swing state of Pennsylvania and is very powerful. So while Lincoln doesn't really like the man, he liked winning the 1860 election. So Cameron was going to be in his cabinet. Specifically, Cameron controlled the Pennsylvania delegation at the Republican 1860 National Convention, and that would decide the nominee of the year. In exchange for giving the votes to Lincoln, Cameron would get to pick his cabinet position. When he reached D.C., he brought his friends, specifically Thomas Scott, a rich railroad tycoon owner. And, with this, Cameron made a promise. The railroads would remain in Union hands. In fact, Cameron practically striked his entire representation on the railroads. And this is a mistake. After Virginia seceded, it took parts of the B&O Railroad. And instead of moving to bring the B&O back in, he just yelled at the owner of the BO about treason. And after this, the B&O owner went to Army officers and others, which Cameron didn't like and felt betrayed, and started discriminating against them. Plus, he's trying to get support from abolitionists, forcing Lincoln to step back some of Cameron's remarks. And Cameron is corrupt. He's so corrupt that when Representative Theda Stevens was asked if there's anything Cameron wouldn't steal, he said, "I don't think he would steal a hot red stove." Cameron took this insult pretty badly and demanded an apology, so Stevens told Lincoln, "I believe I told you he would not steal a red-hot stove. I now take that back." While Cameron does resign, it's really just to save him from the embarrassment of being fired. He gave up his Senate seat to take the cabinet position, so for the time being, he's currently unemployed. 2 days later, President Lincoln appoints Cameron's replacement, Edwin Stanton, the senior advisor to Cameron. Stanton is an obvious choice. He's responsible and a clean politician, though he's still a Democrat, technically. But he's really only in name. Previously, Stanton was known as a very intelligent attorney, and also as President Buchanan's last Attorney General. Though he wasn't Lincoln's first choice, that would be Joseph Holt. Holt is a Southern Republican with even more experience than Stanton. He was in charge of the Patents Office before being promoted to Postmaster General and then becoming Secretary of War, all under Buchanan's administration. He was in fact the Secretary of War right before Cameron. After he was replaced by Cameron, Holt returned to his home in Kentucky, becoming a strong Unionist in Louisville. So, how did Stanton get the appointment? Well, Secretary of the Treasury Simon P. Chase and Secretary of State William Seward, who are rivals, both told Lincoln Stanton was better for the job, and with his polarized cabinet agreeing on something for once, Lincoln picked Stanton. On the 14th, Major General Stonewall Jackson reaches Romney and fights it completely undefended. This operation has been a success. Right? Jackson has taken all the territory he wants, but this was never an end, but merely a means to an end. Destroy the federal army, not get a bunch of small towns. He decides the job isn't done yet, and draws up plans to attack Cumberland, Maryland. But his troops have other ideas. They're from warmer areas than the cold northern Virginia winter, and their enthusiasm has hit an all-time low. During a mutiny, Jackson throws away his plans for further attacks and starts the march back to Winchester, his starting place. He used Loring's division to defend Romney. The expedition was technically a success, but it is far from being a decisive victory. And on the 15th, Edwin Stanton is approved by Congress, is going to be the next Secretary of War, and Cameron has left him a pretty bad position. The War Department has no respect, not from generals in the Army or Congress. Cameron has a terrible relationship specifically with Representative John Potter, chairman of the House Committee on the Loyalty of Federal Employees. Plus, Cameron isn't going away. He makes a deal with Lincoln that if he remains an ally to the administration, he would become the next minister to Russia. So the ghost of Cameron's leadership will be a very hard one to exercise. Then, of course, there are Sickles. He gets news that Edwin Stanton has been appointed, and he is quite glad. Stanton is an old friend, who was even one of Sickles' attorneys during a murder trial. We don't really need to go into that. But what we do need to go into is his writing to Wyckoff. My dear Wyckoff, what is the news? Of course, I'm exceedingly anxious to know what the Senate is doing. Did Miss L., Mrs. Lincoln, think of the senators? Remember me to her very cordially. Sickles wants everything to be perfect. If he is called before the Senate, he wants to make sure everything is in order to receive his commission. Which shouldn't be hard. He has overwhelming support from his men, except a handful in the 3rd Regiment. There was the sharpest possible solicitude from my confirmation, a feeling that is shared by the naval squadron in the river near me. The newcomers, their bunting will be all out for a holiday. My camp will ring with huzzas. That's where the week ends. The end of Jackson's campaign, and the end of Cameron's War Department. But also the birth of something new. Stanton's War Department. One that will work with Congress, and more with the military. One that Lincoln can trust in, and get things done with. and the start of an offensive in Kentucky, a threat to Albertini's position, a threat to the Confederate cohesion as a whole, and a threat to the territorial connection that the Cumberland Gap gives. Thus ends the Old War, the Small War of 1861, and here marks the birth of a new war, one of offensive and political intrigue, one where gunshots blast away at men, and families will lose members in the thousands. 1862 has arrived, and it has arrived with blood. Hello, it's the entire Civil War week by week team here. That is a weird motto to have. And I want a new outro. So, if you liked the video, please like it. If you want to see more, you should be seeing suggested videos right about now. And if you want to know what happens next week, please subscribe. And if you want to share history, give me suggestions in a more easy way than YouTube comments, or want to tell me how wrong I am, please check out the channel's Discord.